Tonight, Blaze Bernstein, the name in the headlines so many of you will recognize. The massive search triggered by celebrities and social media.
But now the chilling new details. You may not have heard about this missing college student. The all-new 2020 starts right now.
Who leaves their house without any of their items at night and doesn't show back up again?
This isn't just anybody. This is an Ivy League college student with his whole life in front of him.
Did he run away? Was he injured? Had he been abducted?
Blaze Bernstein disappeared 1 week ago.
Missing while home for winter break.
My dad was just like, we have each other. It's going to be okay.
And there was an immediate firestorm of attention to this case.
Charlie Puth, who put it out there, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
This is the period in which begins your amateur
This is what we're trying to
investigation.
figure out
You
what's
become a
going on.
sleuth.
We would not have been able to figure it out without the help of kids his age.
I remember showing the police, like, look what I have.
And that's when the whole evening changed.
Blaze Bernstein's phone at that point in time turned off, and I had no more records.
So they've been together, and
Correct.
suddenly Blaze goes dark.
I heard voices raised in the distance somewhere, screaming like,
Blaze's best friend received a text message. I did something really horrible for the story. No one can ever know.
So if you're dealing with a situation like this, you don't want the person who you're hunting to know that you're onto them.
Just help us find my brother.
Well, the search ramping up today for a Lake Forest teen who disappeared while visiting his family over the holidays.
Blaze Bernstein has been missing since Tuesday night.
police searching by ground with canines and by air with helicopters.
We're hoping that he's just incapacitated in need of some medical assistance.
Anyone with information should contact the Orange County Sheriff's Department. Blaze Bernstein.
Blaze Bernstein.
Blaze Bernstein.
What are your favorite pictures here?
The kids like to goof off a lot, and he would dress up. They love to dress up. They love to do puppet shows, and this is him in a school play when he was little. And we spent a lot of time at Disneyland, because it's right here in our backyard.
Oh, yeah.
That's us sitting there. It was a great day.
Memories of much happier times for parents. Gideon and Jeannie Bernstein married in 1992. They moved from Los Angeles to Orange County to raise a family. They have 3 kids. The youngest is daughter Bowie, Jay in the middle, and Blaze, the oldest.
We had a lot of fun raising the kids together. It was fun. And no one can take that away from us, so we still own that.
Blaze Bernstein grew up here in the city of Lake Forest. It's an upper middle class bedroom community about an hour south of Los Angeles, home to about 90,000 people.
Growing up in Lake Forest was really nice. It was kind of inland from the coast, like 30-minute drive from the beach.
It was actually a really quiet residential area. Houses were beautiful, a lot of families there.
When we wanted to start a family, we left Los Angeles with the idea that we'd be moving to a safe suburbia, one of the safest places in the country.
And by all accounts, Blaze is this bright, gifted teenager with a sharp wit and a warm heart.
I've known Blaze since we were babies. Blaze as a kid, besides being very high energy, he was really creative, he was very thoughtful.
Blaze was incredibly bright, curious. He was really a Renaissance young man. I mean, he was interested in everything.
Surrounded by family and friends, Blaze was bar mitzvahed in 2011. That's a Jewish celebration of adulthood on a boy's 13th birthday. It was an occasion especially meaningful to his grandmother.
I did know that his grandmother was from Romania and survived the Holocaust.
I really think that Blaze got it. He was proud to be a Jew, humanistic philosophy, caring about the world and understanding the world's only going to change if human beings change it.
But even though Blaze possessed that understanding, it offered no protection from becoming a target of frequent bullying.
Growing up in Lake Forest was not super easy for him. He was bullied every single day on the bus. He just wanted to get out of the public school system.
And it wasn't just the bullying. Even though Blaze is a good student, he longs for something more.
Go, man, go.
Something that challenged him, not just intellectually, but creatively. And he would find it at OSHA.
OSHA is the Orange County School of the Arts. It is a 7th through 12th charter art school.
In order to get into that school, you have to audition, and about 1 in 10 students who audition actually get into this school. So it's very competitive.
Blaze auditioned for OSHA. He was artistic in every single way possible. He was very creative.
His talents going in were performing arts and writing, and he wanted to move into the creative writing department.
We've had students who wound up professional actors, designers, the writers, the whole thing, musicians.
Among the more famous OSHA alumni are actors Pedro Pascal, class of 1993, who starred in the HBO hit The Last of Us, and Matthew Morrison, a 1997 graduate and star in Fox's popular TV series, Glee.
And I want you to listen very closely to the lyrics because I really mean what I'm singing.
Once Blaze got to OSHA, he felt like there was a community there for him. He had a lot of friends. He was very social.
I met Blaze when he was a senior in high school. He shared some of his writing with me, and I wrote a letter of advocacy for his application when he applied early decision to Penn because he was a brilliant writer.
Blaze's exceptional talents got him into the University of Pennsylvania, and he moved across the country to Philadelphia as a pre-med freshman in the class of 2020. Was he homesick at the start?
I think that the first semester at school was difficult for him in terms of the social life there. He was used to being in a small school. Now he's a little fish in a big sea, and I think that he had to come to grips with that.
When I found out that he was going to an Ivy League, I was like, oh, that makes sense.
At Penn, Blaze got involved in Pen Appetit.
Pen Appetit is a student-run magazine for people who are interested in writing and also interested in food.
He knew that those would be his people.
Our photographer for Pen Appetit, he held a photo shoot where we dressed up in our chef's whites and aprons. We brought whisks and knives. We have photos of him, holding the whisk, being surprised. I mean, he was so helpful, and we're so fortunate to have these photos of him.
It was a Tuesday in January. The 19-year-old Blaze was home for winter break. He was in a really good place and looking forward to second semester of his sophomore year, but not before he treated his family to a special meal.
He was baking butternut squash with, sprigs of thyme that were inside them.
He made a turkey.
And he made a...
He took over my job, more or less. I was on vacation, and he was here.
So dinner broke up, I guess, absolutely normally.
It was a quiet night. Didn't hear anything unusual. I woke up the next day and it was a normal morning.
A normal day until it wasn't.
I got up and Blaze's door was closed, and the housekeeper said, "Oh, don't wake him, let him sleep in." And I said, okay. Well, I knew I had a dental appointment with him that day, so I decided I'd wait until my yoga class was over to try to contact him so I wouldn't wake him. And I tried getting hold of him, and he wasn't picking up, he wasn't returning my texts. But I went to the dental appointment thinking he would show up, and I immediately called Gideon, and I said he never showed up for his appointment. And he said, well, are you sure he slept at the house last night? And that's when
when we both kind of freaked out.
I yelled, oh my God.
19-year-old Blaze Bernstein was last seen Tuesday night.
We're hoping to find him and bring him home safely.
My dad called me and was like, hey, have you heard anything from Blaze? He's not picking up the phone. It's really weird. Just let us know if you hear anything. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right.
I was at work, so I basically run out of my office and jump in the car and drive home as quickly as I can. and just go run upstairs, and his glasses are there, his wallet's there, his keys are there.
Panicked and confused, the Bernsteins were calling everyone they could think of to see whether anyone had seen or heard from Blaze in the last 12 hours.
And what were they saying?
They didn't know anything.
Nobody knew, where his location was.
Well, I found out that Blaze was missing, and it was just really shocking to me because I was like, there's no way that he could have run away. He wasn't that kind of person.
So this is the period in which begins your amateur
This is when we're trying to figure out what's going on.
You become a sleuth.
Yeah.
Well, we had no idea what was going on.
He hadn't slept in the bed. So we knew
And, his bags for going back to school were already packed.
You think, well, hanging out with some kids, other teenagers, and forgot to call home. You have to believe that's a defense against the most awful.
When it became dark outside, I think that's when we started to really be super concerned.
One of the first things the Bernsteins thought of is using the Find My app, which allows users to share their location with others.
So did you have a follow my friend on the iPhone?
Yes, we did. We had that, and I saw that the location services were turned off.
So we called the sheriff's department.
They came and they were really downplaying it, 19-year-olds, they run away sometimes, but they'll be back.
He was adamant that 100% of the time that these kids are out on a booty call or
100%
doing
of the
something
time.
with, he
Of
told
course,
me.
we explained that there were some, unique circumstances with regards to, his personal belongings still being here. And so they offered to do a missing persons report.
So a kid disappears without his glasses, his wallet, or his keys. There are people who actually told me about it just in the couple of days after he went missing, who suggested that maybe this was suicide. Did you ever contemplate that?
Never.
Not even close. He was so happy. He was in a great place.
He was in one of the best places I had ever seen him before. That week, he was so happy. He was so excited to go back to school. He was so excited to just have the rest of his life. And so at that point, there was no doubt in my mind, he would never have done that.
Gideon and Jeannie confirmed with Verizon that Blaze hadn't made any recent phone calls. A quick check of his computer revealed no exchanges on iMessage or Facebook DMs. And so with virtually no solid information to go on, the Bernsteins, along with help from their 14-year-old daughter, Bowie, began dipping deeper into Blaze's social media.
We would not have been able to figure it out without the help of kids his age that he grew up with. and our daughter, yes.
I told my parents, I'm like, I can try and help you find everything that you need. I'm really good with Snapchat. I knew the names of a lot of his friends, so I was able to text them and ask them if they knew what was going on.
And that's when the whole evening changed.
Yeah.
When they said, well, what about Snapchat? That's when the light bulb went on. I mean, we were exhausted, but I said, okay, let's try and figure out how to get in.
Snapchat is a free mobile messaging application used to share photos, videos, texts. But what's different about the app is that whatever is shared, including text messages, disappears from the recipient's screen after just a few seconds.
We were lucky because we knew his username because he was connected with our daughter. And the password ended up being one of the ones that we had on our iCloud keychain. So we typed the username, and then we tried that password in, and boom, we're in.
Still, getting into Blaze's Snapchat account was only half the battle. Yes, it might contain a critical record of who Blaze may have been in contact with the night he disappeared, but as the Bernsteins discovered, simply viewing the message might also trigger it to vanish.
At the time, Snapchat worked. If you sent a message, it could only be saved if you purposefully saved it, and it could be deleted by the person who sent it, and it only lasts 24 hours if you don't save it.
And there were so many other pitfalls with this. I mean, if you take a screenshot of these communications because you think you're saving them, well, that alerts the person that sent it to you.
The sender gets an alert.
So if you're dealing with a situation like this, you don't want the person who you're hunting to know that you're onto them.
What you're describing is basically dealing with this digital nitroglycerin that at any moment,
yes,
could just blow up in your faces. And this is the most important thing in your lives right now.
I had my daughter next to me, and I said, okay, I need you to save, because I know there's a way that you can save it, but I didn't really know how.
What time is it by now?
I don't know. It's like close to 10 o'clock at night, like 9:30, 10 o'clock. And we saw that Blaze gave our address out to somebody.
Did you know who?
We didn't know at the time who it was. We saw the name.
I had absolutely no idea who he was. I was so happy that there was somebody who we could talk to that could just help us find my brother.
Bernsteins didn't know the person Blaze sent his address to, but in the hours ahead, the discovery of that person's identity would turn the desperate search for their son upside down.
Hi, this is Blaze's dad. We really need to know what you know. We can't find him.
This is becoming an urgent issue with trying to figure out what really happened to him, and we're going to really need your help on this because you're the last person that probably saw him.
That was not the person that I really expected him to be with.
Who leaves their house without any of their items, at night and doesn't show back up again?
This isn't just anybody. This is an Ivy League college student with his whole life in front of him.
Right.
A beautiful life waiting for him.
Hours had passed since anyone had heard or seen Blaze. Did he run away? Was he injured? Had he been abducted? There was no sign of him anywhere. Now, as darkness fell, there was finally a glimmer of hope.
We wanted to make sure that if there was any chance that Blaze was still alive, that we took it. I wanted to ensure that not 1 second was wasted.
And the Bernsteins discovered something else. It was a final text message sent to Blaze at 3 p.m. from his best friend. Hey, I'm really worried about you. Please text me. There was no reply. The Bernsteins frantically reached out to that best friend, who told them Blaze did exchange messages with someone else overnight. Now it seemed that person was their best hope of finding Blaze.
We don't know what the conversations were that led up to his disappearance, so we want that information.
Gideon Bernstein, through his own investigation, found out that there was communication on the Snapchat application. And so he was able to message through direct messaging Sam Woodward.
We didn't know who he was. I was like, we should call him. Like, he definitely knows what's going on. And so I encouraged my dad to call him, and we recorded a call.
We haven't heard from him all day. He missed an appointment today, and then we started getting concerned, and I've been trying to figure things out. So you're the first real clue to the puzzle here.
Yeah, honestly, I'm sorry.
I don't know if my dad told me to record it or if I just had the thought that maybe having any sort of evidence that we could hold on to would be able to help us.
I don't mean to put any pressure on you. I know you're a nice young man, but I'm asking you for help on this if you can, if you've got the ability to do that.
Absolutely. This is, I want to find Blaze as much as you do.
During that call, Sam Woodward told Gideon that Blaze suggested they drive to a nearby park to meet yet another one of his friends, but never mentioned that friend by name.
And he said he invited a third friend to come along. So I said, okay.
I didn't want to speak because I didn't want to get involved, but I was listening and to my dad, just ask him questions and go back and forth.
And then did he get out of the car or what happened?
Yeah, he got out of the car, and I got out of the car too, and I just asked him, who is this guy? And he's just like, you'll find out in a little bit, he's a friend of mine. And then, so I'm just like, okay, Blaze, and I just waited there by the bathroom, and I didn't see where he went.
I was just thinking to myself, this is maybe weirdest, situation that we could be in at this moment. And I remember that phone call went on for a while, too.
I guess I realized, did something happen to him? So I went back. I searched all over for him where I was at the library. I couldn't find him anywhere. And I guess I just figured he might just call me in the morning or just pranking me, but I'm scared now.
It's a disturbing phone conversation, which now raises more questions for the Bernsteins than it answers.
We were curious to know who this person was, but then we did find out he was a student at OSHA.
20-year-old Sam Woodward and Blaze were former high school classmates at OSHA.
I have known Sam since he was born, kind of grew up alongside of him. I remember excitement, during Sam telling me that he was going to OSHA.
Woodward grew up only 30 minutes away in the wealthy coastal town of Newport Beach.
Sam was joyful. He was a really happy, special kid.
He lived in this house with his parents and a brother who by all accounts were devout Catholics and attended church regularly.
Everything we did, all the families we spent time with, were from our church.
I did teach Sam Woodward in acting for the camera in his 10th grade, and I had him for the one semester.
For 10 years, Phil Schwadron taught drama and directing for grades 9 through 11 at OSHA.
He was definitely serious. He didn't crack jokes, didn't laugh a lot, as to my memory.
Sam went to OSHA with me from 7th grade to 10th grade. I would say that he did not necessarily fit into the general OSHA artsy vibe.
We came back for what would have been Sam's 11th grade year, and I said, who have I got this year? And my boss said, yeah, you're going to get them all back except one left the school. Who left the school? Sam Woodward left the school.
I wasn't really surprised that he left. I kind of just thought that he left because he just didn't like it there.
After leaving OSHA, Sam enrolled in Corona Del Mar High School. During that time, he became an Eagle Scout, graduating in 2016. Now, 2 years later, nothing seemed to explain how or why this unlikely pair with seemingly nothing in common ended up together in this park. And now, one safely home, the other nowhere to be found. So now you have this critical piece of information. Do we immediately call the sheriffs and say,
yes,
we have something?
Yes, we did.
Yep, right away.
And what's their response?
They come over right away.
They came over.
Okay.
And now it was serious.
We just gave him the lead of the last person we knew that he had seen.
I remember taking that call and showing the police, like, look what I have. We talked to somebody who said that they know where my brother is.
When I first saw the missing persons report and I was reading the details, some of those details definitely stuck out. So something told me just deep within me that this was unusual. So my then partner, investigator, Jack Ackerman, and I went to the park, probably right around lunchtime on January 4th.
I had a feeling as a mother, it was my intuition that something very bad had happened.
On January 3rd, 2018, the day Blaze Bernstein's family realized he was missing, Blaze's sister Bowie recorded a phone call between her father and 20-year-old Sam Woodward, a former high school classmate who says he was one of two people with Blaze the night he disappeared.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bernstein, but your guess is as good as mine.
Woodward said Blaze made plans for a third person to meet up with them in a neighborhood park that night.
Blaze didn't tell me anything about this guy except that he was from OSHA like us.
Really appreciate you calling me and sharing that info. And is it okay if I reach back out to you if I need some help?
Absolutely. I want to find Blaze as much as you do.
When they were talking about meeting another person, I was like, what other person? Who else would my brother, like, be with?
So you want a water? I got a water. How much are you on?
The next day, Orange County Sheriff's investigators bring in Sam Woodward to ask some questions of their own.
You can leave at any time. You're not under arrest or anything like that, okay? We're just trying to find Blaze. Find Blaze. That's it.
As investigators get to know Sam Woodward, they learn that he was living with his parents and working odd jobs.
My goals in life are I just want to start a family. I just want to have enough money to support my kids. I just want to have a wife who loves me and get a good job and go to college.
Woodward says he recently reconnected with Blaze on social media.
He said something like, Sam Woodward. Now, that's a face I haven't seen in a while.
I'm looking for eye contact. I'm looking for his general comfortability to try to gain a sense whether somebody I feel is telling me the truth or telling me a lie.
At some point during the conversation on Snapchat, you decided to meet up. That is correct.
For Blaze's family, the fact that he went out at all that night was a revelation.
We had dinner actually at the dining room table with everybody. He was supposed to fly back to school. So it was going to be the last time my parents were going to see him for quite a while. There was no indication from him that he was going out that night.
During his interview with police, Woodward said that after he picked up Blaze at his house, they drove around for a while, eventually stopping at Borrego Park.
Borrego Park is in the city of Lake Forest. It's a place where you can take your kids. It also has remote hiking trails that stretch for miles.
At some point, somebody exits the car, right?
Mm-hmm. Did he tell you where he was going? He said he was going to meet the friend that he was talking about.
Just like in that call with Blaze's father, Woodward told officers that Blaze was meeting another friend at the park that night. Woodward says he stayed behind as Blaze walked away and disappeared out of sight.
At one point, I heard voices raised in the distance somewhere, but I mean, that happens to my neighborhood all the time. You hear like girls screaming like, ah! And all that. And so I didn't really pay much mind to it.
But I wanted him to feel comfortable talking to me, and he was.
Woodward says he looked for Blaze, but eventually gave up and went home.
I mean, I don't know what happened to him, but something must have.
All that matters is that we find him and we get him back to his family safe.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially her talking to his parents, because his parents are really nice people.
After several hours of questioning, Sam Woodward left. But police, they remained suspicious, so they decided to put him under surveillance.
I'm trying to record it right now. There was a large team that was deployed into the field, and we followed him anywhere that he went.
And with this growing cause of concern for Blaze Bernstein comes the glare of the media spotlight. The Blaze Bernstein missing persons case is now big news.
The Orange County Sheriff's Department searched the park, but they haven't seen any signs of Blaze.
Blaze was supposed to be in school this morning.
He was supposed to fly back Sunday, go to class today, but instead he's missing.
I remember going with my dog to Borrego Park before and kind of just like walking around to see like, what if I find him here?
Bowie documented that desperate period of time with pictures and videos posted on her Snapchat.
Our congregation went into high gear. We printed flyers with his name and picture and the facts and who to call, and we put them up on bulletin boards and poles all around the city.
At this point, it's now in the hands of the police. But you continue to work.
Yes.
Now you take to social media.
Around the clock. You know, it looked like war games in this house. We had terminals all over the dining room table, and we were all just working.
There was an immediate firestorm of attention to this case. We were absolutely inundated with tips from the public. There were hundreds within the first week, and then that grew exponentially.
Some of our contacts were friends with some of the celebrities that were willing to post it on their social media. And so we had the missing persons flyer out for Blaze on Kobe Bryant's Facebook page, and Charlie Puth, who put it out there, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So it started to catch a lot of attention.
We were spending every minute talking about it. People were filming in our house, interviewing my parents. Nothing like this ever happened where we were.
Any sign of him, any clothing, obviously him. We're hoping to find him, hoping that he's just incapacitated and in need of some medical assistance so that we can get him and bring him home safely.
There was like this team of people with drones, and they were going throughout Whiting Ranch Wilderness Park. where we were concerned maybe my brother was back there and maybe there was a mountain lion, or maybe like something happened to him and he was missing or lost.
For the fourth night in a row, the Bernstein family will go to sleep without their oldest son at home.
It was clear as the week wore on that it was more and more dire.
There's a lot of pressure, immense pressure to perform.
Then, on January 9th, with Blaze missing for 7 days now, a discovery which upends the case.
Jack and I were teamed up. Jack said, "Dylan."
You heard it in his voice.
I could hear it in his voice.
We're going to turn now to those new developments in the mysterious disappearance of an Ivy League student.
19-year-old Blaze Bernstein missing while home for winter break.
The Sheriff's Department launched an extensive search with help from the community.
Days had passed since Blaze vanished into the night. The relentless search by police and volunteers had turned up nothing. Just more anguish for the Bernsteins and frustration for authorities.
The Orange County Sheriff's Department searched the park, but they haven't seen any signs of Blaze.
We utilized cadaver dogs. We utilized drones. We had been to Borrego Park and searched that park over and over again with a fine-tooth comb.
On January 9th, a week after Blaze went missing, investigators decided to go back to Borrego Park one more time after obtaining cell phone data showing Blaze and Sam Woodward were there together.
And this is a week after Blaze went missing.
Yeah, it led us to this particular area when all of a sudden Blaze Bernstein's phone at that point in time turned off.
So they'd been together, and suddenly Blaze goes dark.
Blaze goes dark, and then Sam Woodward's phone continues. There was a torrential downpour. It was cold, it was raining, everything was wet, everything was muddy. We searched all this area until my partner Jack and I came to this area right here.
I saw a spot that looked unusual. So I walked down. There was a large tree branch covering an area that looked a little odd, like the rain had kind of settled some dirt around something. I moved the tree branch, and you could see the left hip and upper left leg area of a human body.
And you knew?
You knew.
Had to be him.
Instantly. In my gut, without even seeing the face. And I knew that it was Blaze Bernstein.
They must have found his cell phone as well.
We located a broken cell phone about probably 6 inches, 8 inches below where the body was found.
I was sitting in my English class in 8th grade, and the teacher got a call, and he was like, "Bowie, you're gonna go to the office, they need you for something." And I was like, "Oh, good, maybe some good news." And they took me into this room, and I saw my godmother. She was crying, and I looked at her, and she just hugged me, and she said, "They found him, he is dead. Blaze is gone."
To the index in the body of a college student found in Lake Forest, California. Blaze Bernstein had disappeared 1 week ago. The case now a homicide.
That was the end of hope for me.
We started off this journey over a week ago, looking for our son and asking for everyone to help us find Blaze Bernstein. And we just have learned that they have positively identified our son Blaze's body today.
I just felt so numb, like nothing that had happened in my life had mattered anymore. And then when I got home, my dad was just like, he was just defeated, but he just said, like, "It's gonna be okay. Like, we have each other, it's gonna be okay." Sorry.
The specific details of what occurred at Borrego Park are part of the ongoing investigation.
The autopsy revealed injuries which I believe were a result of an extremely violent encounter. Blaze was stabbed 14 times in the left side of his neck, 5 times in the right side of his neck. He was stabbed, in the knee. He had defensive wounds all over his fingers. He was fighting for his life, and probably a surprise attack.
You hear about that many stab wounds. What does it tell you about the person or the mindset of the person who did that?
Hate and rage. Intimate. It was an intimate killing.
It was devastating news for the family and for the community.
My reaction when I heard it was fury, anger, disbelief. I haven't felt those feelings in my life.
As the investigation into Blaze's murder began, hundreds gathered for a vigil in his honor.
We lost one of our sons. I hope that we can all join together and support the Bernstein family.
The funeral was incredibly painful. We had to ask for RSVPs because we could only accommodate here in the building about 11 or 1,200 people. And then there was a public service at the largest space we have in Orange County a few weeks after the funeral in the 3,000 seats, and that was full.
I believe most people are good.
Students from Blaze's Performing Arts High School chose to sing Luke Bryan's song, Most People Are Good.
I see a lot of goodness here, and I hope that we can bring more tolerance, more peace, understanding, and love to everything that we do and make a better world for our children. Thank you.
The community wrapped its arms around the Bernstein family. The park near their house where Blaze played as a child and where his body was found turned into a makeshift memorial with messages of love and support from all over the world.
This is a note somebody left us. Dear Lord, please watch over the Bernstein family and give them strength during this time. Please guide our police department to help them find the person or persons who took Blaze away. We still needed answers because we didn't have anybody in custody. In my mind, the hunt was still on.
But for investigators, the hunt would become far more complex because they've discovered that the night of the murder, Blaze's best friend received a text message from Blaze's phone saying, quote, I did something really horrible for the story, but also no one can ever know, end quote. Blaze's friend responds, what story? But gets nothing back.
That was the last text message that was sent from his phone.
The last text message from the phone of a murder victim is always going to be of critical importance to a homicide investigator.
We are 6.5 years since my son was killed.
Blaze is ready. Blaze the trail.
We are all going through our own personal hell right now.
Blaze Bernstein was found with 28 stab wounds.
You hear about that many stab wounds. What does it tell you about the person or the mindset of the person who did that?
A lot of anger somewhere from within, and he took it out on Blaze Bernstein.
Did I introduce him to something that later on came back to haunt us all?
And not only was this just a murder, now we're starting to see a bigger picture.
What do you make of the fact that it's very possible that a neo-Nazi killed Blaze in the United States?
He's the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. This can happen anywhere.
There was almost like a gasp from some people.
Police believe they know who killed Blaze Bernstein.
Were you planning to kill him that night?
I hope that we can all join together and support the Bernstein family.
We're hoping for better results, but yesterday afternoon, sheriff's investigators did find the body of Blaze Bernstein.
19-year-old Blaze Bernstein was first reported missing by his family on January 3rd, 2018. But after a week-long search, he was found dead in a park near his parents' Orange County, California home.
As this investigation moves from search and rescue to a homicide investigation, we ask for your continued support in providing tips and information to the Orange County Sheriff's Department.
As investigators search for answers about who had killed Blaze and why, his parents Jeannie and Gideon flew east to Philadelphia to begin a grim task: cleaning out Blaze's apartment on the campus of the University of Pennsylvania. The grief-stricken Bernstein family invited us to go with them for this emotional and difficult journey.
This is the apartment building that my son moved into. He's on.
Let's first look at his mail.
5 days before he came home to California.
It's been hard especially for Jeannie, to come here, having to go and, basically clean up your child's life after they're gone.
And the kitchen was meticulous. I mean, he had every appliance and everything. I loved his apartment. It was so beautiful. It was so Blaze.
This is the Whisk sweatshirt that my brother got. He was an editor for the Pen Appetit magazine. We were going through his closet and we found it, and I was like, I'm gonna take that.
We had an opportunity to meet Blaze's friends. We will be here for you forever, and we appreciate your friendship.
I'm delighted that Blaze had them in his life because I know that they all made him very happy.
He would have loved this. He used to wear this all the time.
Oh, that my dad.
Blaze was someone that you can trust with anything, and I trusted him with my life. It was the parent that Blaze was figuring out himself, whether it be religion or sexuality or experience.
At what point as parents did you realize that Blaze was gay?
I had an idea about it when he was probably early high school. I saw something on a phone or that he didn't want me to see, and it kind of confirmed a suspicion that I had, and I think he knew that I had seen it.
We actually had a conversation while he was back at college, and he was telling us essentially, yeah, I am gay, but I just don't want to talk about it.
Did people at school know? Was he?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think his friends knew at school.
Because Blaze was so open about his sexuality with me, I feel like that definitely gave him a better foundation. So if he was to go to his parents and his family and open up about that part of his life, he would have known that we were all there for him.
You noticed that too? Yeah. I took a picture of it. In the mirror.
As a mother of a gay man, I am proud to be that.
Blaze is ready.
Let's do this.
Blaze the trail.
You feel like, like an artist, that you have spent your lifetime sculpting this amazing piece of artwork, and then it gets destroyed. And so here we are. Our artwork is gone. Hard to accept.
Back home in California, the investigation continued, and the focus remained on Blaze's former high school classmate, Sam Woodward, the person who admitted to driving with him to Borrego Park.
We have interviewed that friend several times. That person is not in custody, and we are not prepared to comment on persons of interest at this time.
When Orange County Sheriff's investigator Dylan Jansen first spoke with Woodward the day after Blaze was reported missing, he says Woodward seemed nervous and told different versions of where at Borrego Park he and Blaze went that night. And Jansen says Woodward had what appeared to be injuries on his hands.
Those cuts in your hands, they look pretty gnarly. I mean, how do you think you got those from the fight club?
Sam said he was involved with a fight club. He said that he sustained these cuts to his hands after somebody was clawing at him during one of the fights.
When I swung at him, I kind of fell on my ass. And I usually try and have my hands to break my fall for me, and so I landed on some rocks.
I've heard of fight clubs, but I didn't believe it. Anytime that Sam Woodward was walking around the station, when he touched the doorknobs, he would cover his hands with the sleeves of his sweatshirt. Is he attempting to cover up fingerprints? Is he attempting to cover up DNA? It was definitely something that stood out.
Nearly a week after that interview with police, when Blaze's body was found, investigators went looking for Sam Woodward once again.
Investigators said that when they searched Woodward's bedroom, there was some damning evidence. They found a knife with blood on the handle and on the tip of the blade. They also found bloodstains on a sleeping bag outside his window and on the driver's side of his car.
The knife that was found in Sam Woodward's room, the areas of the vehicle that had apparent blood in it, the sleeping bag that was found on the side of Sam Woodward's home, they were all tested for DNA, and those results concluded to be the blood from Blaze Bernstein.
With this new evidence, police are now ready to make an arrest.
Under arrest, 20-year-old Samuel Lincoln Woodward suspected of killing Blaze Bernstein.
Police say DNA evidence led them to arrest the 19-year-old's former high school classmate.
I remember thinking to myself, that's the guy that was on the phone.
I want to find Blaze as much as you do.
At the time, I thought, I wonder what my brother was thinking before he died. I wonder if he was in pain, or I wonder if he could have saved himself. I think once Sam was arrested, I knew my brother didn't have a chance.
But something authorities were playing pretty close to the vest was motive. Why would Sam Woodward want to kill Blaze Bernstein? As the days unfolded, investigators would confront a possibility they hadn't even originally contemplated.
Not only was this murder, we're starting to see a bigger picture. It was absolutely shocking.
This morning, the Orange County District Attorney's Office filed one felony count of murder against 20-year-old Newport Beach resident Samuel Woodward.
Before joining ABC News, I spent 26 years as a deputy district attorney in the Orange County DA's office. And for a time, I was one of the prosecutors consulting on this case. Sam Woodward was taken into custody 10 days after Blaze went missing and 3 days after his body was found.
There was the victim's DNA on property that was in the control of the defendant.
Well, I remember that moment well. I was sitting in my room. I think I was watching it on television, and I just thought to myself, it's finally happened. Now what?
With the knowledge of how Blaze was murdered, now an excruciating reality for the Bernsteins, the focus turned to why.
Blaze was stabbed nearly 20 times in the neck. Using a knife to kill is particularly violent because you have to be up so close. That many wounds says this was likely a crime of rage or of passion, more personal than your typical murder. So as a prosecutor, my next question would be, who is Sam Woodward and what was his relationship with Blaze?
I had no clue why Blaze would be meeting with Sam. You know, they were never really friends in school. I just know that everybody else got bad vibes from him.
Woodward grew up in Newport Beach, the wealthy suburb south of LA in Orange County. He was a Cub Scout and Eagle Scout, and as we know, Woodward spent part of his high school years at OSHA, the same elite art school where Blaze had also been a student.
It took me a couple of minutes as I watched the footage. It started to dawn on me, oh my God, that's the Sam I taught. Every kid in my acting for the camera class, it was film work. So I said, everybody pick your favorite movie and bring me a scene or a monologue from that film. And he said, I want to do something from the Army. So I gave him Brad Pitt's speech in Inglourious Bastards.
As a bushwhacking guerrilla army, we're going to be doing one thing and one thing only: killing Nazis.
The provocative Quentin Tarantino World War II thriller is about a plan to assassinate Nazi leaders by a band of Jewish soldiers.
It weighs heavily on me. Did I introduce him to something that later on came back to haunt us all?
A.C. Thompson, an investigative reporter for ProPublica, uncovered some disturbing information when digging into Woodward's background.
When I started reporting on Sam Woodward, what really stuck out to me was this. Sam Woodward was a member of the Atomwaffen Division, which was a neo-Nazi terrorist group that aimed to bring down the U.S. government and incite a race war.
Race war now!
Atomwaffen posted violent propaganda videos online to spread a message of hate and to help recruit new members.
The Atomwaffen Division was a neo-Nazi group that existed from about 2015 to 2020. They were inspired by Charles Manson. They were also inspired by Tim McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber. They weren't interested in protests or marching in the streets. They wanted to kill people.
That organization was hell-bent on destroying America within, taking down the system.
My reporting team and I got access to thousands and thousands of private chat messages that were between members of the Atomwaffen group. Sam Woodward was one of the people in these chats.
Writing in the chats under the alias Saboteur, Woodward spewed anti-Semitic, anti-gay, misogynist hate.
When we executed the search warrants on several electronic devices, including computers and cell phones and laptops, there were thousands of images of white supremacist propaganda and hundreds of images to include the Atomwaffen Division.
But Woodward's interest in Atomwaffen apparently went beyond just talk in a chat room. Also found on Sam Woodward's devices was a picture with James Mason. He's a neo-Nazi whose writings Atomwaffen members describe as a main influence on the group, along with a photo of Woodward in a skull mask giving the Nazi salute.
Now we're starting to see a bigger picture. Not only was this just a murder, there's a high probability that Sam Woodward killed Blaze Bernstein because he was homosexual, possibly because he was Jewish, or a combination of both.
I'm here to announce the Orange County District Attorney's Office will file an amended complaint, a hate crime enhancement accusing Woodward of intentionally committing first-degree murder, due in whole or in part to Blaze's sexual orientation. We will prove that Woodward killed Blaze because Blaze is gay.
What do you make of the fact that it's very possible that a neo-Nazi killed Blaze in the United States?
Yeah, if that's the case, that's going to be the biggest tragedy of this story.
He's the grandson of a Holocaust survivor. This can happen anywhere. You aren't safe from this type of hate.
But something else that's still not adding up, how were Blaze Bernstein and Sam Woodward connected? They were both from Orange County, but Blaze, a young gay Jewish man, and Woodward, a member of a neo-Nazi group, seemed to have nothing else in common. Why were they together that night in the first place? Sam Woodward would have his day in court with a stunning new look and a surprising defense. While Sam Woodward was arrested for killing Blaze Bernstein in January 2018, it would take 6 years for him to face a jury. Woodward was charged with first-degree murder, a hate crime. He pleaded not guilty.
19-year-old Blaze Bernstein was stabbed repeatedly and killed back in 2018, and now, 6 years later, that trial finally begins today.
By the time the trial was starting, I'd already left the DA's office, but I was watching the proceedings closely.
Still, no one seems prepared for the Sam Woodward that has led into Judge Kimberly Menager's courtroom.
There was almost like a gasp from some people, just to kind of that visceral reaction to kind of seeing him. Long, dark, stringy hair, long, dark beard, covering his face. It's hard not to kind of draw mental comparisons to Charles Manson.
Blaze Bernstein was found
with 28 stab wounds.
Senior Deputy District Attorney Jennifer Walker's opening statements tell the story of a young man who they say set out to murder 19-year-old Blaze Bernstein in cold blood. That hate crime charge, she explains, that was brought because prosecutors believe the evidence showed Sam Woodward murdered Blaze because he was gay, but not because he was Jewish.
You'll see the cell phone evidence, the defendant's words, the defendant's hate.
But in his opening statements, defense attorney Ken Morrison did something we definitely don't see every day by making a stunning admission.
My client, Sam Woodward, was responsible for that death. The why is the single most important issue you will need to decide.
This is no longer a trial about guilt or innocence. The question now becomes, did Woodward plan the killing because of a hatred of gay people? Was it premeditated? If the jury agrees, that could mean a first-degree murder conviction and most likely a sentence of life without the possibility of parole.
Morrison argues for a lesser charge of voluntary manslaughter and an acquittal of the hate crime allegation, which would result in a reduced sentence and a chance for parole.
The evidence will show that Blaze Bernstein's sexual orientation had absolutely nothing to do with the reason he was killed.
Jennifer Walker calls her first witnesses, Blaze Bernstein's parents. Gideon Bernstein now faces down the man who killed his son as he recounts the painful moments when the family first realized that Blaze was missing.
You remember where you were when you got the phone call?
I do remember that, yes.
And why does that stand out in your mind?
Because it was the beginning of hell.
Jennifer Walker then brings an Orange County Sheriff's deputy to the stand to describe what he watched Sam Woodward do on January 5th, 2018, after police decided to put Woodward under surveillance.
What did you observe?
I observed him what appeared to be cleaning his vehicle, the interior and exterior.
He had in his possession what looked like a spray bottle of cleaning product.
He's not scrubbing the driver's side door.
It was very strange to us. What was he cleaning? Why?
Jennifer Walker then digs into the heart of her hate crime argument, portraying Sam Woodward as somebody who changed from Eagle Scout to neo-Nazi.
He had developed his long-standing beliefs against Jewish people and gay people and started joining groups that espoused the views that he had.
This is where Woodward's involvement in the extremist group Atomwaffen becomes key for the prosecution. Investigators say they found these images on Woodward's personal devices.
The prosecution calls an ex-member to the stand whose voice has been altered and his face obscured at the request of the court. He's also using an alias.
Good morning, Mr. Murphy.
Good morning.
Prosecutors allege that Woodward sought out the group, and once there, the fires of his hatred were further stoked as he attended multiple meetings.
So this summer of 2017, Austin, Texas, tell us what you and Sam Woodward did.
We took propaganda photos. That involved us throwing up Nazi salutes. Put the Atomwaffen logo on the photos, for propaganda purposes.
The prosecution also presents what Woodward himself labels Sam's diary of hate, emails he sent to himself over a 7-month period in 2017.
The prey that the defendant had chosen was gay people. And he kept a diary of his feelings and intentions.
And who did the prosecution allege that he was, quote, hunting? Well, they say that Sam Woodward had been visiting online dating sites to connect with gay men.
Downloaded Grindr so I could send photos of their fellow sodomites getting killed and tell them that they're going to be next. They're terrified, LMAO. This is too much fun. They think they're going to get hate crimed, and it scares the out of them.
And this is how the prosecution claims Sam Woodward targeted Blaze. Well, he was hunting for victims on the dating app Tinder. The two men first connected on the app in June of 2017, 3 years after they'd been classmates at OSHA. And then again, the night Blaze disappeared. The last exchange is allegedly what led to their encounter in Borrego Park.
And then here is where the luring starts. And the defendant says, "Is anyone near you right now? Because I just wanted to say." And Blaze says, "Nope." "No, what? No one is near me." And the defendant says, "I might make an exception for you." And the defendant says, "Look, do you have Snap?" And then we have Blaze snapping his address to the defendant at 10:37 p.m. on January 2nd of 2018.
According to prosecutors, the trap had been set and Blaze stumbled right into it that night when he agreed to meet up with Sam Woodward.
But when it's the defense's turn to present its case, jaws will drop in the courtroom because the star witness will be the defendant himself, Sam Woodward. And the crux of the defense's case, that Sam had a secret and would go to any lengths to hide it, even if he had to kill.
He kept saying something that I can only remember as, "I got you already. I got you, I got you."
Today we're going to another day of court. It's definitely a challenge emotionally and mentally to get up and just have to go and do this.
We are 6.5 years since my son was killed. We are all going through our own personal hell right now. The prosecution rested last week, and we're now listening to defense witnesses.
Sam Woodward's defense attorney, Ken Morrison, is making his case.
Sam did not hate Blaze for any reason.
Remember, the defense has acknowledged that 26-year-old Sam Woodward killed Blaze Bernstein, but they insist it was neither a premeditated murder nor a hate crime.
You will also hear lots of additional evidence that helps to explain why this homicide was committed.
But just as Morrison starts laying out his case, the defense team is dealt a blow. The judge rules that some evidence is inadmissible, including that mysterious last text message sent from Blaze's phone on the night of the murder. "I did something really horrible for the story, but also no one can ever know."
The jury then hears how Sam Woodward was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, which the defense says hindered his ability to make and maintain friendships and contributed to Sam's acute sense of isolation and loneliness.
This helps to explain how starved Sam was for the camaraderie, the brotherhood, and acceptance, and how profoundly vulnerable he was to recruitment into groups like Atomwaffen.
The defense claims Sam Woodward's participation in Atomwaffen wasn't as much about ideology as it was about connecting with others and just having a good time. Morrison calls former Atomwaffen member Tyler Wiesing to the stand.
So would you characterize the camp as very serious in terms of the ideology, goals, training, that sort of thing?
That was the intent and the image. In the reality, it was a bunch of people getting drunk and not taking things seriously.
As for those Tinder messages, well, the prosecution argued that Sam Woodward was online to hunt and terrorize victims. Morrison says that never happened, and he argues that in this case, it was Blaze who pursued Sam.
June 15, 2017, Blaze Bernstein saw Sam's profile on Tinder, and Blaze Bernstein initiated the first contact with Sam Woodward, not the other way around. And then Sam says, thing is, you're not too shabby looking yourself, Blaze. Blaze says, well, thanks, Sam. That's sweet of you. An emoji. Sam says, yeah, you're cute, TBH, to be honest.
According to the defense, Sam Woodward was repressing his own feelings of homosexuality, which could help explain the reason behind, quote, Sam's diary of hate.
He's trying to kind of keep this as like this hidden away part of his life, that these hate diary entries are simply narrative constructs to cover up that part of him should Atomwaffen members get suspicious.
Morrison argues that Sam Woodward was tortured by his sexual identity because of what he claims he heard at home. He calls Woodward's mother, Michelle, to the witness stand.
Ms. Woodward, was it ever communicated to your children that homosexuality is a sin?
Yes.
And who communicated that?
My husband.
The defense calls James Markle to the stand, please.
Family friend James Markle tells the court about an incident he says Michelle recounted to him about Sam's father, Blake.
Was there any particular word that Michelle Woodward told you that she would hear Blake call Sam?
He would say he would say K.
But when called to the stand, Sam Woodward's father, Blake, denies using any homophobic slurs.
Would you make derogatory remarks about homosexual people in Sam's presence?
No. But ultimately, the case would hinge on the testimony of the one person who was there the night Blaze Bernstein was killed, Sam Woodward.
The defense is calling on Samuel Woodward.
For the defense, calling their client to testify is a risky move. It can be viewed as a Hail Mary or as a very shrewd tactic to play on the jury's sympathies.
And Mr. Woodward, can I ask you if you're able to move the hair out of your face a little bit?
Sam Woodward's defense attorney, Ken Morrison, takes Woodward through the story of his life, arriving at a key question.
Sam, was there ever a time in your life that you can recall where you wondered whether you might be gay?
No. No, I can't say really there was, no.
This may have just blown up Ken Morrison's defense, which hinges on the argument that Sam Woodward was struggling with his sexual identity. And that will become hugely important because of what Morrison is about to argue Blaze did that night, which he says provoked the attack.
You will learn that Blaze Bernstein was not killed because of who he was, but because of what he did to Sam Woodward after they met up.
What will Sam Woodward say happened that night?
When you drove to Blaze Bernstein's house to pick him up, Sam, were you planning to kill him that night?
It's day 28 in the trial of Sam Woodward, and defense attorney Ken Morrison is questioning his client about the night that he and Blaze ended up in Borrego Park.
I'm pretty sure I said we should hang out at some point, or rather it'd be cool if you wanted to, and right after that, he said to me that he was actually free this night, right now, and at that point, I said, all right, cool.
Sam Woodward testifies that after picking up Blaze near his house, the two men eventually arrived at the park. There, on a bench, Woodward claims the night took a dark turn.
Woodward said he smoked some marijuana, was starting to kind of get drowsy, kind of nod off. He feels something and opens his eyes.
I saw a hand right on my crotch with my pants unbuckled. I looked right up and I saw him, and he had his phone in his hand. He kept saying something that I can only remember as, I got you already, I got you, hypocrite. I heard him maybe use the word outed in the same sentence. I couldn't exactly remember.
If Sam Woodward is to be believed, Blaze was threatening him, and that's what made Woodward snap.
What, if anything, did you think he was doing with his cell phone?
I thought he might photograph me. I thought he might send text messages. I thought he might be trying to record me.
So at any point in time, did you see Blaze actually appear as though he was texting any messages?
Yes.
Sam Woodward says his fear was that there had been an image or video taken and that his family would learn about it.
I grew up in a home with my mother and my father and my brother. Loved them more than I can almost speak about. My father, though, if he'd heard about something like that got out somehow, I couldn't fathom that.
Sam Woodward then describes how he says things escalated.
I found one of the knives that I had used to open up the container of marijuana. I just kept driving and driving and driving and driving the knife down.
When you say driving the knife down, Sam, were you stabbing Blaze?
At that point, yes, I was.
In an effort to try to dispel any argument that this was a hate crime, Morrison asked Sam Woodward two final questions.
When you drove to Blaze Bernstein's house to pick him up, Sam, were you planning to kill him that night?
No, not at all.
Did you hate him because he was gay?
No, not at all.
But now, here's where the gamble of putting Woodward on the stand could either pay off or lose big.
Okay, so walk me through it, sir.
On cross-examination, Jennifer Walker attacks Woodward's credibility.
The left side of his neck was closest to you, right? If he's sitting to your right?
Everything was a blur.
Well, how did you stab him 14 separate times on the left side of his neck when he was sitting right next to you?
I can't remember.
And how did you stab him 5 separate times on the right side of his neck when he was sitting to your right?
I can't remember.
After a trial full of fits and starts, spanning almost 3 months, the case goes to the jury. The jury deliberates for about 8 hours.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant, Samuel Woodward, guilty of the crime of first-degree murder.
Thank God. It's an emotional moment, even for the court clerk.
A felony and violate. Just 1 sec.
Sure.
I've prosecuted a lot of murder cases, and I can't say I've ever seen a court clerk react like that.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find it to be true that the defendant, Samuel Woodward, committed hate crime, first-degree murder.
We are thrilled with the verdict, which holds Samuel Woodward accountable for the brutal, violent, painful murder of our son. Justice has been served. Thank you.
Breaking news now, an emotional afternoon in an Orange County courtroom. The sentencing has just been handed down for the man convicted in the hate crime murder of Blaze Bernstein.
This time the court does sentence the defendant to state prison for the term prescribed by law, which is life without the possibility of parole.
The jury said that they saw this as a hate crime and that hate is not going to get you anywhere in this world.
In the 7 years since Blaze Bernstein's murder, the family of Sam Woodward has never spoken out beyond their court testimony. But the Bernsteins say the Woodwards did leave something for them back in 2018.
Have they reached out to you, by the way?
Yeah.
We found a note under our doormat.
What did it say, this note?
Orange County Sheriff's investigator Sergeant Dylan Jansen knows Borrego Park a lot better than he would like to. In the initial days of the investigation, how many hours would you say you spent at this park here?
Countless. I spent a lot of time over here just looking, thinking, analyzing, what was the truth, what's not the truth.
We may never know exactly what happened the night Blaze was murdered or what that last text message meant. But Sergeant Jansen can answer one question based on the evidence.
That cell phone, even though it was damaged, we were able to send it to various companies to restructure the cell phone and extract any and all information on there.
Were there any pictures of that night?
No.
This park is pretty meaningful for you.
So we stop here and go check out the garden of rocks that are now over in the corner.
Do you feel that you get a little bit of closure each time you put one more rock down?
I don't even know what closure is when you lose a child. I think maybe closure for me will be just being able to look at all of these things and be happy.
Almost 7 years after I walked in Borrego Park with the Bernsteins, the memorial of painted stones honoring their son has blossomed. Jeannie and Gideon have both moved away from Foothill Ranch, but they tell me they still find solace in this place.
In the Jewish tradition, it is a thing that you put rocks at a gravesite.
And there's a permanence to it.
It gives us some feeling of connection to people, the people that will hear our story and understand the importance of eradicating hate in this world. This is about love.
Since 2018, the Bernsteins have been building a movement. They call it Blaze It Forward.
The Blaze It Forward campaign was based off the idea that as a community, we can make a difference and we can change the way that this world works. We were able to take that in my brother's honor to try and encourage people to just do one good thing every day.
They participate in local pride parades, and Jeannie hosts a podcast featuring people doing good in the world. Sam Woodward's parents, Blake and Michelle Woodward, never responded to an interview request with ABC News, but they did write a letter to the court, submitted at sentencing. It reads, in part, "In the past, you could look into Sam's eyes and be surprised at the level of sensitivity and warmth. It's one of his best traits. Now, he's too vulnerable to let you look him in the eyes. He committed a crime, but he is not a person without value, unworthy of respect."
Speaking about the Woodward parents, they left a note at your house in 2018, right?
They did. At the time, I thought it was infuriating because one of the things that they said in that letter was that that both families are going through a hard time right now. I don't think that she had any idea how hard of a time we were having.
But there's another letter that holds more meaning for Jeannie and Gideon, discovered after the trial, tucked among the colorful painted stones of Blaze's memorial.
This is a copy of a note that was left for us in the park by one of the jurors. She basically says in this letter to Blaze that she's really sorry that she didn't get to know him.
Thank you everyone for coming to class today.
So Blaze would be 27. Do you ever think about what he would be like today had he lived?
He'd be doing something fantastic. I know that about Blaze, and he'd be making people happy. That's what he did. Blaze is always on my mind. I think about him from the minute I wake up until I go to bed at night. He was my person.
You take it. It's on record.
He was a piece of man. He's gone. But I'm still here, and whatever he's done to make an impact on this world is what we're going to leverage and try to make sure that people never forget about our son and what happened.
Sam Woodward's defense lawyer, Ken Morrison, David, says his client didn't get a fair trial. Woodward has appealed.
Morrison claims there are several appellate issues because of evidence the jury was not allowed to see. In the meantime, that is our program for tonight. Thanks so much for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
It's Saturday night in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and the town is hopping.
It's party central. I mean, it's spring break. The Strip is hot and happening, and everybody's ready to party.
Ocean Boulevard is a stretch. It's beachfront road. Around spring break, on the weekends, it gets really packed.
17-year-old Brittany Drexel is having the time of her life until she disappears without a trace.
So with no clues or witnesses or even a crime scene, it's going to be very difficult for investigators to figure out what happened to Brittany. And it's really going to be difficult to figure out who in this group of spring break partiers is involved in this. One thing's for certain, there's no sign.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's a town with something for everyone. Bars, beaches, golf courses. It's got everything. Total spring break type of place.
The boardwalk area is really known to be a bustling night spot. There are people who are enjoying strolling along the promenade, enjoying the lights, the music, having a few drinks.
Myrtle Beach is such a big spring break spot for people in Rochester. So a lot of the college kids, even the high school kids, would go to Myrtle Beach for spring break. It was a well-known spring break spot. Brittany was 17. On spring break from high school, she was invited by people that she knew from Rochester would go to Myrtle Beach for spring break. But these girls were in college, and the girls' boyfriends were as well. So they were just a little bit older.
She said, "Mom, can I go to Myrtle Beach?" And I said, "Brittany, no, you're not going. I don't know the kid you're going with. There's no parental supervision." I just had a really bad feeling about it. So about an hour later, she calls me back and she said, "Mom, can I stay at a friend's house? You know, it's my spring break. That way I can hang out with my friends and we can go to the beach." Well, the beach to them was Lake Ontario. So I told her it would be okay if I had spoken with a parent. Her friend's father calls and he said it would be okay if she stayed.
I mean, what 17-year-old hasn't lied to their parents? But this is a big lie because you are going out of state with people that you're not that familiar with. They're friends, but they're not close friends. That was Brittany, though. Brittany was super independent. So if she wanted to go, she was going to go.
They were sort of paired up, boyfriend, girlfriend, and she was sort of the fifth wheel, but had stayed in constant communication with her boyfriend back in Rochester.
Her and her boyfriend, John, were definitely texting back and forth the entire time. And she was always texting somebody, whether it was her best friends or whether it was her boyfriend. Constant communication. John had called me asking if I had heard from Brittany. I was like, no, I haven't heard from her. Like, Brittany's last text, she was mid-conversation with John, saying, you know, I'm just gonna go back to the hotel. I'm gonna pack up my things. I'm just gonna go to bed for the night. And he was like, why? Like, why, babe? Why, boo? Why, you know, are you gonna do that? and she never responded as to why. John told me I'm gonna call her mom and tell her.
So her boyfriend, John, called me and he said, you know, Brittany's in Myrtle Beach and they can't find her. And I'm like, what do you mean they can't find her? I didn't believe it because I told her, I said, she couldn't go down there to Myrtle Beach.
Thanks to Brittany's boyfriend, Don knows the truth. Brittany went to Myrtle Beach and now she's missing.
John had texted her and he said, Brittany, what is going on? John, he couldn't go down there with her because he was working. So he had talked to her every day. And Brittany did a lot of texting on her phone.
Brittany was an over-texter, texting everybody. Certainly by the plethora of text messages to her boyfriend, John, she was agitated. She was upset.
For Brittany, when she was angry, it would take her a while to come down from it. She was not the type of person that would just blow something off. We called Brittany's phone over and over and over in hopes that she would have answered it. And I knew something was wrong.
So for her to stop texting, not just John, but everybody knew that something bad had happened to Brittany Drexel.
And so John ended up leaving work to come to my house, and then we started calling all the kids and the friends. One of Brittany's friends was in the Marine Corps, and he was stationed in North Carolina in Camp Lejeune. I called him because it was the only person that I knew that was close enough to Myrtle Beach because I was so frantic. He ended up talking to his commanding officer, and he was able to leave.
He waited all night. The girls finally showed up and he said to them, "Where's Brittany?" And they said, "Brittany who?" He shows them a picture of her. He goes, "This girl." So instantly, everyone's suspicious of these girls.
That Saturday night when she went missing, they wouldn't even answer my calls.
Later that day, Don's family friend convinces authorities to take a missing persons report. He's really persistent. There's something wrong. You know, Brittany was from a good family.
She was a normal child, very happy. She liked to dance, she liked to sing. She started playing soccer when she was 5, so soccer was her game. She was just a lovable, funny child.
But there was some emotions, some sadness, some tension at that time.
Well, Brittany was in her junior year of high school. I was going through a divorce with Chad. That was her stepdad. He adopted her when she was very young, at around 3 years old. She was just going through the divorce and having her own issues being a teenager.
There'd been problems in the family, but she's not a runaway. She's not that kind of girl.
But it is very common for kids to just be like, hey, I'm extending my vacation, or I'm mad at mom, or I know I'm in trouble, so let me enjoy my time for one more day. I'm not gonna get myself right back to where I'm gonna be grounded immediately. And that is very common in these vacation spots where kids go for spring break.
So unfortunately, they listed her as a runaway. Dawn was really, really upset about that because she knew her daughter didn't run away.
Dawn is going through a divorce and trying to raise 3 kids, and now she has to go search for her missing daughter. She must be living a nightmare.
Early in the morning, I had started packing, and my mom and dad and one of Brittany's really good friends, Tara, and her boyfriend and their friend also came with us. And I think it took us like 18 hours to get to Myrtle Beach.
Investigators contact Brittany's traveling companions. They say they last saw her at about 8 p.m. on April 25th.
According to her friends, Brittany left them to go and see another friend who was staying at another resort.
When Brittany left the Bar Harbor, she was going to Peter's hotel to pick up her flip-flops because she had been with him at the beach earlier that day, left her flip-flops there. She was receiving text messages from one of the girls telling her, hey, have you seen my black shorts? Brittany says she's wearing them, and the girl's like, I want to wear them tonight. Can you bring them back? So, you know, Britt had just walked a mile there, and now she's got to turn around to walk back.
The question is, does she turn around and head back right away, or does she continue on to see Peter? The girls don't seem to know. They swear they never see or hear from Brittany again. They call and text her, but she doesn't answer.
Her friends provided a description of what she was last seen wearing: a pair of black shorts, a black and white tank top, and flip-flops. It's important to figure out who the last individual was to see a missing person. It helps to sort of start the clock and figure out where or when they may have gone missing. It's definitely a priority for the Myrtle Beach Police to figure out who this Peter person is and what he may know about Brittany's disappearance.
Given the police's designation that Brittany is a runaway, Dawn already doesn't trust them, so she does the next best thing.
I get to Myrtle Beach, I go directly to the media because I figure, you know what, if I get her name and face out there, maybe somebody will see her and I'll be able to find her.
Brittany Drexel disappeared in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
It had captured the media's eye. You know, a beautiful young girl comes down on spring break and goes missing. Certainly anybody around here would have known with the news coverage.
Brittany's born with a congenital condition in her right eye. People who are born with persistent hyperplastic primary vitreous have one eye that looks slightly different than the other, and it may be off-center, slightly discolored, those kind of things. So by wearing contact lenses in both eyes, they can make it appear that the eyes are the same. And I think that's what she's chosen to do in this case, and she would have had a very distinctive look about her eyes because of that.
The next day, I met with law enforcement. I said, something is seriously wrong. My daughter just didn't disappear off the face of the earth. I asked law enforcement about the cameras in Myrtle Beach because I knew there was cameras on the boulevard. I could see them. And they had told me that they don't work. And I'm like, what do you mean they don't work? I mean, you have tons of people come through here. You have crime in Myrtle Beach. I don't understand.
But for London, England, I don't know of a place that's got more cameras than Myrtle Beach. It's one on every corner. But it wasn't that way in 2009. There were cameras, but it was a patchwork of cameras and a lot of holes in it.
But at least one place down there did have working cameras.
We were looking at just still photos of Brittany from the surveillance footage from the Blue Water. And looking at those photos, you know, we couldn't tell. It could have been any other short little blonde girl. We suggested, can you take us to go see the surveillance? Can we go view the footage in action? And we did, and it was the confirmation that we needed because of the way Brittany's eyesight is. When she needs to see, she turns her head in a full angle. And at the Blue Water, she does just that. And it was like the way her movement was, the way that she walked, and the way she tilted her head, we knew that that was Brittany at that point.
Because of the security cam footage, investigators now know that Brittany was in fact in that hotel between 8:33 and 8:45 p.m. on April 25th. She was there to meet a guy named Peter. But who's Peter?
Peter Brozowitz. She was friends with him and was a club promoter from Rochester.
Brittany's family and friends tell investigators everything they know about Peter.
I didn't really know Peter that much. I heard Brittany talking about him, and I think she met Peter probably, I'd say 3 to 4 years prior. They had dance club nights where they'd have like underage with some of the nightclubs downtown Rochester.
Alcohol wasn't served on those nights, so minors were allowed in.
She had started going with her friends to go out dancing, and I knew Peter. He worked at one of those clubs where she had went to.
Brittany's friends tell police that she ran into Peter at Myrtle Beach nightclub on April 24th, then again at the beach at 11 a.m. the next morning. The question is, did Brittany and Peter plan these meetings in Rochester, or were they just coincidental?
I'm not sure what Peter and his friends were doing or when they had arrived in Myrtle Beach. I believe that Brittany saw him along the boulevard or was on the beach. And like I said, a lot of people in Rochester do go down there for spring break. So it was another familiar face and someone that she felt comfortable with because she was no longer hanging out with the group that she had originally gone down with.
There was a lot of tension between the girls, and because they weren't really good friends, they ended up by kind of going off and doing their own thing, which left Brittany sort of alone a lot of the time. She did know that Peter was down there doing some party promoting and stuff, so he had gotten her into a couple of the clubs.
So Peter Brozowitz is the last person to see Brittany before she disappeared. That makes him what we would consider a person of interest. He might be a witness, he might be a suspect. Don't know until we find him and speak with him. What does he know about Brittany's disappearance? The surprising problem for investigators is that Peter's now gone.
Him and his friends packed up in the middle of the night and left to go back to Rochester. Police looked at that behavior as suspicious. I mean, who wouldn't?
He had left town almost immediately after Brittany had become missing. And the police were really on that, thinking he must have something to do with her disappearance. They immediately land on Peter and develop him as a suspect. They're at first on the phone. They even went up to New York to talk with him in person, and they did a lot to try to track that down through him and getting his story. And he was sort of aggravated to be answering these questions. To their mind, that's even more that you are a suspect. They thought they had their guy, especially with his attitude back to them. They thought that he was being defensive. It wasn't, he just didn't want to be bothered with it. He and Brittany were not that close. He had already planned on leaving on that day. He had people with him the entire time. He had alibis that were built into it. And once they tracked down all of that stuff, they almost hesitantly said it couldn't be Peter.
Police search Brittany's hotel room. They find all of her clothes still there, but not her purse or cell phone, which is not surprising considering her purse is visible in the last known video footage from Peter's hotel, the Blue Water, and she's constantly using her phone.
Yeah, that phone's important for investigators. It could certainly show a location of where she may have been at the point where she stopped texting. It could help narrow down the location of where she might be right now. It could also help investigators track her movements over a certain period of time.
It was a lot of triangulation and a lot of guesswork between towers. And what a lot of people don't understand is as you're driving, your phone is reaching out to other towers, even though you may not be using the phone.
With us calling her the evening of the 25th, they were able to see the cell phone towers that her phone was pinging on and able to see where it began and where it stopped.
Now, what they did at the time was called a tower dump. And that means you go to several towers and just get every phone that has done a handshake with that tower. In Myrtle Beach, it's thousands.
Her cell phone was traveling in the direction to the Bar Harbor, where her destination was. And then it immediately took a turn. It turned around and started heading south towards Georgetown. And with the pings, they were able to see that her cell phone made it there within like a half hour and straight to the Pole Yard Landing. And Pole Yard Landing is a desolate boat launch in the middle of a swampy forest that no 17-year-old from Rochester, New York would have any idea about or have any reason to be there. This is very serious at this point.
And they see her last phone usage with the tower somewhere around South Santee River, which is the border of Georgetown and Charleston.
Brittany's friends and family are determined to find her.
We all left Myrtle Beach and we went to Georgetown, and we stayed in Georgetown, and that's where we were able to conduct the searches. And a lot of people came in and they did a cone from the last cell phone tower ping, and that was where they focused their searches on as well.
For 11 days straight, from April 26th to May 7th, from sunrise to sunset, investigators search for Brittany, but they find no trace.
When the extensive search turns up empty, local law enforcement is forced to reach out to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, otherwise known as SLED.
Georgetown's working on it, Myrtle Beach is working on it, Horry County, SLED, there's a number of agencies. A lot of people are working, but the case ultimately gets fairly cold with no one else to look to.
The fact that there is no body does give people hope that she is still alive. But with no crime scene, no clues, and no suspects, friends and family begin to wonder if they will ever know what happened to Brittany. Two years go by with no developments in the disappearance of Brittany Drexel, but the investigation never stops.
I stayed there for about 2 months looking for Brittany, talked to anybody I could. After I left there, because, I had to go, I had 2 other children that I had to take care of. And I called law enforcement. When I got back, it was like every day, then every other day, then every week. And then it just grew from there. But I felt like if I didn't do it, who else is going to fight for my daughter?
And what you really had was Myrtle Beach doing the lion's share of the work early on. Then you had Georgetown, a different department that was involved once they really figured out where the pings of the phone went.
The pier where Brittany's phone last pinged was in the jurisdiction of Georgetown, and detectives there have a hunch.
Georgetown had their monster that was Raymond Moody. And they couldn't connect it to Raymond Moody, but it's one of those things that you say, if there's a bad person in this area, round up the usual suspects, it's Raymond Moody. And they all knew in Georgetown that Moody had served 20 years of a 40-year sentence for hurting young girls in California. So he was always sort of the boogeyman in Georgetown.
Law enforcement agencies have access to vast databases of known offenders. So we know what types of offenses they've committed, we know where they've committed them. Often this information would be sort of correlated to see if somebody sticks out, especially somebody that may have been in that area. So if we have somebody who has a history of this type of offense and they are in the area at the time a crime is committed, they are certainly a person of interest for law enforcement.
Investigators have good reason to suspect Raymond Moody based on his past.
Raymond Moody, he was a level 3 sex offender. He had 5 charges on him prior. The last charge was 2 weeks prior. This was his MO. He brutally raped girls from the ages of 8 up until the age of 17. He was in prison in California for 40 years. He got out in 20. He was supervised for 1 year.
Raymond Moody is a person of interest in 2011, and they do a full search on his motel room at the Sunset Lodge in Georgetown. And they went in and took pieces of the walls, of the carpet, of the mattress. They're taking all this, they're hoping to find DNA, and it's all gonna get sent in, it's gonna be analyzed, and hopefully something comes of this.
At the time of the search, Myrtle Beach Police Captain David Knipes tells reporters that they will not be providing any further information, including the name of the subject and why they think he may be involved. He also says that no arrests are expected at this time.
And it was like this big thing, and then nothing happened. There was nothing to charge him with, to try to hold him on, absolutely nothing, besides his background. So given his background and his criminal history, I believe that they kept eyes on him, but there was nothing connecting him and Brittany at that time, and it was another dead end.
Around the same time that they search Moody's home, police interview his girlfriend, 43-year-old Angel Voss.
Angel.
Generally, police will speak with anybody that they believe may be able to provide information related to the case they're investigating. Nobody's obligated to speak. So just speaking to somebody's partner in and of itself is not going to necessarily reveal any information. But it certainly may shake things loose a little bit if the suspect isn't speaking to the police.
Been doing this a long time. I want you to talk to me. You scared of it?
Angel Voss admits to being afraid of Moody, but claims she doesn't know anything about Brittany's disappearance.
Oh, he always had these fantasies about lifting girls off the street and raping them and then taking them somewhere and dumping them. I mean, he had such things all the time.
She said that Ray's fantasy was to abduct a girl, rape her, and then kill her.
He told me his first venture was in California, and he said that they didn't catch it. He said there was at least 12 or more. He hadn't told me anything about here.
While Angel's comments to investigators are certainly interesting to them, they don't provide any actual proof of Moody's involvement in Brittany's disappearance or anybody else's.
The stories being told about him were pretty deep, but it was a lot of speculation, very little evidence.
There's no evidence at this point that Brittany is deceased. We don't know where she is, but there's nothing to say that she's no longer with us.
On the 5th anniversary of her disappearance, a group of South Carolina newspapers revive interest. Brittany's mother tells reporters that she thinks her daughter has been trafficked. Brittany is a very beautiful young woman, and she has aspirations to be a model. Her mother thinks that maybe someone could have lured her with the promise of a modeling job.
There was a lot of rumors fueling the human trafficking story. You know, it's not far-fetched because Myrtle Beach, as beautiful as it was, has a dark side, and it's a hunting ground for young girls. I mean, if you're a pedophile or if you're attracted to younger girls or girls who could be victims, they're drunk and on spring break, Myrtle Beach is the place to go. So when the story was fueled that she may have been trafficked or crossed state lines, the FBI became involved.
A woman named Betty Ubion, who helped create a law establishing a task force to investigate human trafficking in South Carolina, thinks that Brittany's case sounds exactly like one involving human trafficking.
It's very important for the family to keep up hope. Hope is not something for the investigators. Hope is something that the family clings to make them feel better while the investigation is ongoing.
Brittany Drexel did leave the Myrtle Beach area. We believe she traveled to this area around McClellanville and the North Charleston, South Georgetown area, and we believe she was killed after that.
The working theory at this point is that shortly after Brittany's disappearance, she was taken somewhere in the vicinity of Georgetown, which is where her cell phone stopped pinging, and she was murdered.
The reason they are so convinced is because a South Carolina inmate named Taquan Brown, who is serving a 25-year sentence for manslaughter, has a very interesting story to tell.
An inmate at the South Carolina Department of Corrections says, "Do you want to know about the little white girl that went missing?"
Brown says a man by the name of Timothy Deshawn Taylor killed Brittany. Brown knows this because he says he saw Taylor commit this crime.
Timothy Deshawn Taylor is a convicted criminal who is facing further charges stemming from his role as a getaway driver in a 2011 robbery of a restaurant.
So he goes through a story saying that I was at a house in and around McClellanville, and Brittany was there. She was being held hostage. She actually got away and ran for a while. Timothy Taylor was there. He chased her down, brought her back in.
McClellanville is in South Carolina, about 60 miles from coastal Myrtle Beach. Brown describes going to this stash house to see Taylor's father. And on April 27, 2009, just 2 days after Brittany went missing, Brown says he saw Taylor and others doing terrible things to Brittany.
He says he saw Brittany Drexel gang raped, and she tried to escape, and they shot her, wrapped her up in a carpet, and fed her to the alligators.
They brought Dawn in and told her that it was their understanding that this has happened.
All I could do was sob because I was like, oh my God, like, how could they have done this to my daughter? And it was very difficult for me to even picture that in my mind.
The FBI offers a $25,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the people responsible for Brittany's disappearance. They believe Brown's story, but they need to corroborate the information. They can't just take his word for it. They know there are other people there, and they're hoping the offer of the reward will spur them to come forward and corroborate his information.
Taylor's name got released. There had been rumors that he might have been involved, and everybody was looking for a suspect. They were looking for information from the public. They were hoping more people would come forward to back up the story of this jailhouse informant.
Brown's story is backed up by a second inmate, and he goes on to add that Deshaun Taylor himself brought Brittany to McClellanville to show her off for the purpose of trafficking her. He then goes on to claim that when Brittany's disappearance starts getting too much media attention, Taylor kills her and decides to feed her to the alligators.
The reason why they thought that this was information that could potentially be the truth, it was two jailhouse informants that kind of had the same story. They did a search of all the gator pits that were known in the area based off of this story.
But Brown's story was never able to be corroborated by any physical evidence. Police believe he likely have made the entire story up for the purpose of maybe getting an early release, even if it meant lying about somebody else to get it.
And I think for that small amount of time, the FBI thought that they had found their person, much like early on, Myrtle Beach thought that it might be Peter. But in addition to those two, there may have been 1,000 calls coming in. I saw her here, I saw her there. People trying to help, but it had flooded the public's conscience so much that all of these calls coming through certainly didn't help.
Again, we think we have the people responsible for it, and then another dead end, another wall that we've hit in this case. And being involved as I was, I mean, it was devastating for myself, but being her mother, her father, I mean, I can't even imagine just to hear her name and her story constantly come up, and then there's still nothing at the end of the day.
Law enforcement, prosecutors, everybody started back in and said, we're going to go through everything from the beginning and start looking at all of the data. We're going to put a fresh set of eyes on it. And what they found was that they had a call in by a woman that was associated with Angel Voss. And that lady had been at a party with Angel.
Sometime after 2016, more than 7 years after Brittany's disappearance, this woman had claimed that Angel Voss said that Moody was responsible for killing Brittany.
That lady was just mortified. She got up minutes later and left the party. She went and told her story to the police. So the police did ask her to wear a wire and go talk with Angel Voss again. And then Angel repeated the story to her. And Angel said, it wasn't Ray. I killed Brittany Drexel. When the FBI got a hold of that information, then they started trying to work back to Angel Voss.
The FBI conducted a review of the interview with Angel. They're considering whether or not she had some involvement in assisting her boyfriend, Raymond Moody, commit this crime.
Raymond Moody had raped several people in California and went to prison on a 40-year stint. But while he was there, his roommate and boyfriend became Ernie Merchant. Ray, he sort of protected Ernie, and they became lovers in prison. So he felt like he would protect Ray when they got out. So they moved together to Georgetown and lived together for a while until Ray met Angel and started dating her. But he was back and forth between Angel and Ernie. So Ernie Merchant tells the story of one night when he and Ray were back together, Angel calling Ray's phone. Ernie picks up the phone and she says, "Ray, what you've done, you're going to get us all locked up for the rest of our lives. I can't believe you've done this. Sorry, so-and-so." And Ernie takes that information and calls Ray Moody's children and says, "You're not going to believe this, but I had this conversation with Angel Voss." So Ray's children actually call in and give the police the information. The person that you're looking for in Brittany Drexel's case is my dad, Raymond Moody.
Local investigators wanted to believe it back in 2011, but they looked into Raymond Moody thoroughly and came up empty. Now the FBI wants to do a deeper dive.
They go back to Angel Voss. Once she sees the gig is up, she agrees to work with the FBI. And the FBI turns her loose and says, "If you'll come back tomorrow and wear a wire, we need you to go talk with your boyfriend, Ray." She agrees, but she goes immediately and tells Ray what has taken place. Ray they're packing up, they're basically leaving. The FBI sees it all going to pot. They stop Ray, and Ray's very defiant out of the window. "I'm never going to tell you anything. If you've got a warrant or whatever, get it." And one of the FBI agents says, "Ray, you got it all wrong. Now we're going after Angel Voss." So Ray says, "Well, hold on." He settles down. Ray then goes and meets with his attorney. Scott Bellamy is the defense attorney. He calls and says, "Can you come over here to his office right downtown?" And I walk over, he's got Ray with him. And Scott says, "Ray will give this information, but he wants to give it to you. He's not talking to the police." So I sit down with Ray, and he tells me pretty quickly that he and Angel were on Ocean Boulevard. They see this little girl. Ray says that she comes up to the car and says, "That smells like good weed." And he asks her, "Do you want some?" She says, "Sure." She gets in the car. They smoke for a while, and Ray says that he asked her, "Does she want some cocaine?" She said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, that's in Georgetown." So that's his excuse of them going to Georgetown. They get to Georgetown. They've got a campsite down at the Pole Yards, South Santee River. And he said that Angel leaves to go meet with her brother. Ray says that it is there that he rapes her and that she fights and screams out, and he says, "Look, I've already got one strike. If I get another one." So he ends up killing Brittany Drexel. He says that she fought back against him and he strangled her to death. puts her over a fence at the pole yards in the wooded area. And he says that when Angel comes back, she says, "Where's the girl?" And he says, "She's not here. Her friends came and picked her up. We're not going to talk about her anymore." He tells me that the next morning, early in the morning, say 3 o'clock, he goes to where he's dumped the body, he picks her up, and he takes her and he buries her. And I said, "Can you take us to the body?" He said, "Sure."
He knew the evidence against him was piling up, so he thought he would jump out in front and confess to the crime. This crime was terrible, and his story doesn't make him look any less guilty.
Is all of it true? Obviously not. Ray Moody's a monster. I would not buy a car from Ray Moody. I would bet $1,000 to a donut that she did not approach his car. She didn't ask about weed. She didn't ask about cocaine. I think he probably hollered out to her, and I think she accepted the ride because there was 2 people in the car and because she really didn't want to walk 30 blocks after having just walked 30 blocks. I think it was an opportunity for her to be able to get that article of clothing back and nothing more than that. And I think that the evidence also shows when she got into that vehicle that she was separated from her phone. Now, how that happened, I don't know. But I know that it would not have been voluntary.
Raymond Moody comes forward and admits, "I did it, and I'll make a deal with you. If you protect Angel, I'll take you to the body." And they made a deal with the devil.
On May 11th, 2022, Raymond Moody takes police to human remains buried in a shallow grave in a wooded area in Georgetown County, South Carolina.
Police are able to confirm Brittany's identity through dental records and DNA testing. Because only skeletal remains were found, the cause of death is very difficult to determine, almost impossible.
It was kind of like a little weight that you didn't know you've been carrying for 13 years is now off your shoulders. And it's like, we finally have her. And it was just sadness, but happiness at the same time. And to finally be able to kind of know that we can bring her home or have her be in a sense of peace now was everything. And that was the happiness portion of it.
So we go to the sentencing with Ray. I did my victim impact statement.
I hope you suffer in prison for the rest of your useless life. I have no regard for you, just like you had no regard for my daughter's life.
And Ray ended up getting 30 years for the abduction, 30 years for the rape, and life without parole for her murder. So now he'll be in prison for the rest of his life.
In the summer of 2003, medics in New Jersey were perplexed. Patients under their care were becoming gravely unwell, with no logical explanation.
Nurses were noticing that their patients were mysteriously crashing. Strange things were happening.
When the alarm was raised, investigators quickly came to a horrifying conclusion.
when you have cases of high digoxin levels with low blood sugar, with high potassium, with no explanation. You have to think somebody is doing this on purpose.
The investigation zoned in on experienced nurse Charles Cullen, but detectives faced an uphill struggle to stop him.
At that point, the chase was on to try and stop Charles Cullen from killing again, from killing more.
It would take the help of Charles Cullen's best friend to finally bring him to justice.
So I said, I'm going to get him, and I'm going to get a confession out of him, and I did.
How many patients have you helped to their death?
Possibly 30 to 40 patients.
Suspected of murdering as many as 400 patients over a 16-year career of killing, Charles Cullen was finally exposed as one of the world's most evil killers. It was a case that shocked America. Experienced nurse Charles Cullen had moved from hospital to hospital without suspicion, leaving a trail of death behind him.
From place to place where he went, strange things would happen. No matter what happened, they tended to let him go. And each time he basically resigned, so this way he could move on to another job.
Author Charles Graeber met with Cullen behind bars and delved inside the mind of the callous murderer.
He's a serial killer on a massive scale. Someone who was given the trust of the public to protect the most vulnerable amongst us, to protect our loved ones, to care for them. And he violated that trust in the most horrific manner. And he sat coolly by as they suffered horrible deaths. And that is surely a raw sort of evil.
This killer's story begins on the East Coast of the United States.
Charlie Cullen was born in New Jersey in West Orange, February 22nd, 1960. West Orange was a bit of a rough area. It was a bit of a poor area in an otherwise affluent area of New Jersey. He had 8 brothers and sisters and was the youngest of the family, a sort of late life mistake.
On the 17th of September 1960, when Charles Cullen was only 7 months old, his father died at the age of 56.
His mother struggled desperately to keep the family going and together. They existed on almost nothing. Welfare checks and charity and handouts.
Young Charles Cullen struggled to deal with his environment.
At the age of 9, he horrifyingly tried to commit suicide by drinking part of a chemistry set. He was a deeply, deeply disturbed child.
Cullen was possibly predisposed towards personality disorder. And if you put that into that unstable background, that can have catastrophic effects.
The troubled child also sought revenge for how he and his family were being treated.
One of his sisters was pregnant. The boyfriend would come around quite often, and he was abusive to Charlie. He beat his girlfriend, Charlie's sister, relentlessly to the point of miscarriage. And Charlie tried to poison him with eye drops in his drink.
The one person that Cullen seemed closest to was his mother. But on the 6th of December 1977, tragedy struck.
His mother, Florence, was killed when he was 17.
She died in a car accident with his sister behind the wheel. She had a seizure, and his mom ended up dead.
Cullen made his way to Mountainside Hospital in nearby Montclair in the hope of seeing his mother.
By the time he went to the hospital, they'd already taken her body away. And he never forgave the hospital for doing that, for not allowing him to see his mother, for somehow stealing his mother from him. And that is a theme, I think, that really resonated through his life, the sense of loss and his sense of grievance with hospitals.
Devastated, Cullen once again attempted to take his own life, but was unsuccessful. He dropped out of high school, and in 1978, the 18-year-old sought a new path in life.
He decided that perhaps he should find a family, and the family he chose was the US Navy. He enrolled, enlisted, and indeed was sent to work on a submarine, the USS Woodrow Wilson.
But the Navy didn't end up being the safe and secure place that Cullen hoped for.
And I think he felt that submarines would be that exciting war movie version of subs and life abroad. But really, the submarine life couldn't have suited Charlie Cullen any less. He was trapped in a metal tube for months at a time with the sort of guys that would give him a hard time in high school.
Cullen complained that he was bullied in the Navy. He would have been a little bit of an outsider. He wouldn't have mixed well, made friends. If he's got that victim mentality, he's going to perceive any kind of rejection as bullying.
On the 30th of March 1984, the Navy released Charles Cullen from service.
They didn't give him a dishonorable discharge. It's essentially neutral references, you might say. And then he went home to West Orange, where he started working in a department store as a clerk without any real sense of purpose.
Life as a store clerk didn't appear to suit Cullen, and soon the 24-year-old decided to embark on a surprising career path.
Charlie Cullen ended up going to nursing school, and the place he chose to go was Mountainside. So the place where he lost his mother was the very same place he started his career.
In 1984, it wasn't normal for men to sign up for nursing. Perhaps he thought in a female profession there would be less bullying, or he would be in a group of people who would be more supportive of him, and he would have more power.
June 1987 was a busy month for Charles Cullen. The 27-year-old graduated from nursing school, got married after a whirlwind romance, and started his first nursing job in Livingston, New Jersey.
He actually cut their honeymoon short so that he could start work at the St. Barnabas Hospital burn unit. And Cullen's job was to essentially scrub dead and dying skin off of burn victims so that they could grow new skin. And it's a horrific job for anyone, especially someone fresh out of nursing school.
In June of 1988, 72-year-old Judge John Yengo had been admitted to St. Barnabas with severe sunburn and was under Cullen's care. Judge Yengo was hooked up to an intravenous drip and given treatment, but unfortunately didn't make it. Over the coming years, the hospital faced a worrying trend.
Nurses on staff were noticing that their patients were mysteriously crashing, and it was happening with great frequency. Patients would be prepared for surgery, have an IV bag hung, and all of a sudden they'd become incredibly sick. They were essentially instant hypoglycemics.
As nurses disconnected the IV bags, the patient's condition would immediately start to improve. Staff at the hospital were perplexed about why this was happening.
They started examining the bags, and they found that some of them had tiny pinpricks, as if they'd been injected with something. And then they tested those bags, and they found that they were supposed to just contain saline solution, but instead they also had insulin in there. In fact, a lethal dose of insulin.
Staff at the hospital were faced with a horrifying situation. Was there an innocent explanation about how this had happened, or was something more sinister afoot? It was a terrifying prospect, but there was a real possibility that someone who was charged with caring for patients was actually trying to kill them. By January 1992, investigators at St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey, were at a loss as to how so many IV bags had been lethally contaminated. 31-year-old Charles Cullen was interviewed as part of the investigation.
He was a participant as a nurse who was often offering his services, going fixing the IVs.
Cullen was unhappy that he'd been spoken to about the situation, and he left St. Barnabas Hospital. The following month, Cullen secured a new job in nearby Phillipsburg, New Jersey.
He just goes down the road to another hospital where he's quickly hired. There's a nursing shortage, and his recommendations are neutral or positive at this point. There's no reason not to hire him.
Cullen was working on a ward in August 1993 when a 91-year-old woman was admitted.
A patient named Helen Dean. She was on the ward, but she wasn't his patient. Helen Dean's adult son, Larry, would visit with his mom quite frequently. He remembers being at her bedside when a nurse he hadn't seen before entered the room. And this nurse said he had to do something with Larry's mother. Could he please leave the room? Larry came back in a bit later, and his mother said, "He stuck me." And Larry took out his little microscope on his Swiss Army knife and could see a little pinprick on her leg.
Larry left the hospital, but before he could return, his mother had died. He mentioned to staff about the pinprick.
And they started an investigation and then tested Helen Dean's blood. And they tested for dozens of drugs that might have killed her, and they found nothing in her system because the one drug they, for some reason, did not test for was digoxin.
Digoxin belongs to a class of drugs called cardiac glycosides. These drugs increase the force of the heart, and it is also thought to do something else with the electrical activity of the heart, which will slow down the heart rate.
Larry was convinced that something untoward had happened to his mother, but the hospital couldn't find evidence to back this up.
In that investigation of Helen Dean's death, Cullen and another two nurses were asked to take lie detector tests. Well, Cullen passed. There was no sign that he'd done anything.
Away from work, Cullen, now the father of two daughters, had started drinking heavily, and his wife had had enough of his unpredictable behavior. In January 1993, she ended their marriage. Cullen's life was spiraling out of control, and he was soon in trouble with the police.
He was arrested for stalking the house of a colleague, a nurse and her son. He was found to have gone into the house while they were both asleep.
Investigators charged Cullen with trespassing rather than stalking, to which he pleaded guilty. He was given a year's probation.
Charlie Cullen attempts suicide a few more times. He's in and out of mental institutions. And this is a pattern that continues for the next 5-6 years. He moves hospital to hospital. Each time he starts off as a great nurse. Everything's fantastic. He's an ideal hire. He is the good nurse.
But no matter where Charles Cullen went, death seemed to follow him. By November 1998, the 38-year-old had started another new role, this time at Eastern Hospital in Pennsylvania. The following month, 78-year-old Otto Schramm was admitted.
Mr. Stram was an older man. He wasn't doing particularly well. His daughter would visit quite regularly and was especially surprised then when a nurse she hadn't seen before asked her to leave the room. And the next day when she came in, her father was dead.
It was time for the transient nurse to move on again, and by June 2000, 40-year-old Charles Cullen had started working at yet another hospital, St. Luke's in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
It was a particularly prestigious job. It was a well-paid job. He started off as a nurse that everyone was glad to have available to them. He worked nights and weekends. He would take other people's shifts. He was always happy to help out.
On one overnight shift, 2 nurses observed Cullen going into a closet where medicines were being kept. Cullen left the room a few minutes later, and the nurses walked in.
They found that the fully stocked shelves of medicine, many of them had been thrown away.
Another nurse was going to dispose of a used needle in a sharps box, but found it full of vials of drugs to treat heart and blood pressure.
The nurse reported Cullen to the hospital officials, but rather than face an investigation, Cullen decided to resign.
After a brief 2-week stint at another hospital where he didn't get on with his colleagues, Cullen found a job in September 2002 at Somerset Medical Center in New Jersey.
He begins to make friends there. He falls in with 2 other nurses, Amy and Donna.
Amy and I were very close, as well as Charles. We were called the Three Musketeers, and we loved working together.
He was just a friendly guy, little bit shy, little bit reserved, but he was someone that I knew that I was going to be able to bond with quickly.
Charlie Cullen really leaned into that relationship, a mothering relationship, and so she took him under her wing and protected him from the world.
We were fast friends and became very close. I trusted him, and we trusted each other. We had a really, really good trusting relationship.
Cullen worked alongside Donna and Amy in the intensive care unit, where code blues were a regular occurrence on shift.
Code blue is a resuscitation. So when someone stops breathing or their heart stops or they go into a dangerous dysrhythmia that is life-threatening, we start CPR, we start giving medications. We do everything possible to save their lives.
We were a team, and if an emergency was going on, or if you needed to act quickly with a patient, and other nurses would just jump in and help you.
It was on one such night when a patient began to crash in front of Cullen and his colleagues.
There was one particular patient that had started to code and was in a certain dysrhythmia, and Charlie was in the room when I arrived. He had given a medication called lidocaine. And I remember thinking, why would you be giving lidocaine?
Lidocaine was an older medication that was no longer used for particular dysrhythmias. As the patient passed away, a doctor arrived on the ward wanting to know who'd given them the outdated drug.
Because I was the code leader, I needed to take responsibility for it. And I said, I gave lidocaine. And he said, that patient is allergic to lidocaine. And I just trusted Charlie because he's so brilliant. I trusted that there must have been a reason why he had given that medication.
The 3 friends continued to support each other through the good times and the bad. At one point during their shifts together, Amy was shocked by blood test results from patients in her unit.
There were lab results that were coming back that were blood sugars that were too low, digoxin levels that were too high.
And we thought, oh my gosh, there must be something going on with the lab because this lab work is just crazy.
One of the patients showing high levels of digoxin was being looked after by Donna.
They actually questioned me about thinking, did I give the wrong dose, or trying to figure out like exactly what happened. But I always would check with another nurse just to make sure I was giving the right dose, just because I know it's a dangerous medication, because people's lives are in your hands and you can kill them. So you really have to know what you're doing.
We really thought that there was something wrong with the lab or there was something wrong with the pharmacy. We just thought something was malfunctioning.
But it soon became clear that the lab results were in fact accurate.
As we get into 2003 at Somerset Medical Centre, more and more sudden, unexpected deaths take place.
In June 2003, one of the nurses from Somerset contacted the New Jersey Poison Control Center with a concern. The nurse had a query about digoxin levels in a patient who was no longer taking the cardiac drug. Poison expert Bruce Ruck took the call.
At that point, the only explanation that we had as a team was that somebody accidentally gave the patient the wrong medication. And all we are thinking at this point is medication error.
But 2 weeks later, a pharmacist at the same hospital called the Poison Control Center with similar concerns.
And I said to the pharmacist, do you have any patients that have hypoglycemia, low glucose, blood sugar? Do you have any patients with very high potassiums and some other things? And then there was the dead silence. And the answer, yes. And that's when I said, it sounds like you have a police matter on your hands.
There was no doubt in Bruce Ruck's mind that something sinister was going on and that somebody was deliberately harming vulnerable patients. The hospital was told to find out who was responsible before any more patients wound up dead. In the summer of 2003, Bruce Ruck from the New Jersey Poison Control Center knew that time was of the essence to find out who was poisoning patients at Somerset Medical Center. Bruce sat down with some of their top team, but he wasn't met with the expected response.
They were doing a lot of yelling and screaming at us. And there was a lot of discussion on their end that we should mind our business.
Bruce explained the severity of the situation.
And we said, when you have patients who have 2 cases of high digoxin levels with no clear explanation, patients with low blood sugar, with high potassium, you have to think somebody is doing this on purpose. Somebody really needs to investigate it.
It must have come as a frightful shock to the hospital authorities. Do you mean we've actually been employing someone who's interested in killing our patients and not helping them to live? It's a very difficult thing to take on board.
On the advice of Bruce Ruck, the police were contacted by the hospital and were told there'd been a number of unexplained medical incidents. 2 detectives were briefed by hospital bosses who told them that their 4-month investigation had been found to be inconclusive. Then, on the 31st of October 2003, seemingly without warning, 43-year-old experienced nurse Charles Cullen was moving on once more.
Charlie was fired absolutely out of the blue. No one could believe it because here was one of our best nurses being fired.
We just couldn't believe it. We didn't understand it. It didn't make sense.
Cullen told his friends that there was a perfectly good explanation for what had happened. Unopened medication vials had been disposed of, and he had been wrongly blamed for it.
I was just really concerned and really sad for my friend, and I actually told him that I would give him a reference to go to another hospital.
Amy and Donna were devastated that their friend had been treated so unfairly. But there was more turmoil to come.
I came into work, just my regular scheduled shift, and I was told that there's some detectives here, they want to ask you some questions. And I was like, why? For what?
With little evidence in relation to the deaths, detectives needed to interview members of the nursing staff who had, so far, been kept in the dark about an investigation taking place.
What the detectives needed now was more. They were trying to talk to all the nurses, one by one, and they were forced to conduct those interviews in the presence of the risk manager. Essentially, the boss is sitting in on every interview.
I was the last nurse to be interviewed, and I sat down in front of the lead detective.
To Amy's surprise, detectives wanted to know more about her friend and former colleague, Charles Cullen.
I decided I was going to say, this is a witch hunt and this is bullshit. And there's no way that there was anything going on with Charlie Cullen because he was a great nurse.
The risk manager was called away from the interview room unexpectedly, and one of the detectives seized this opportunity to have a more open conversation with Amy. He slid a report across the table, data listing all medication removed by nurses from their dispensing machine, Pyxis.
And I saw Charlie's printouts, what he was actually taking from the Pyxis. There was one particular medication that normally you take out one vial every 2 weeks to reconstitute that particular drip. And one particular night, he took out 12 of those vials. When I saw the evidence, it was absolutely glaring. There was no way around it. I had to accept it. There was no possible way he was taking them out except for sinister purposes. He had been harming patients.
It was a bombshell moment. Amy was now faced with the realization that one of her closest friends may have been killing patients under their joint care.
It was that moment in my life that everything changed. I remember just blanking out. It was like a complete shock to my system.
Detectives explained they didn't have strong enough evidence to arrest Charles Cullen yet. They asked Amy to work alongside them in secret, keeping in touch with Cullen as if nothing was wrong.
They were hoping I could get something out of him to explain what was happening. Even though I knew what had been happening, it was still a betrayal of my friendship, and I was lying to him, and that didn't feel good at all.
At the same time, the body of one of the hospital's recently deceased patients was exhumed. Reverend Florian Gall had died of a massive heart attack earlier that year.
And the coroner found that he had more than enough digoxin in his system to kill him. That was, in fact, the cause of death.
Detectives now had various pieces of evidence linking Cullen to the murders, but nothing solid enough to act upon. Meanwhile, the 43-year-old continued to find employment in the healthcare system.
Charlie had called me out of the blue to tell me that he had gotten a job. He was going to start working, and I called one of the detectives.
Cullen would soon be at a new hospital with many vulnerable patients under his care. The pressure was on to prevent any more deaths.
They said, we need to step this up. To actually put that nail in the coffin, they needed the smoking gun, and that meant getting a confession out of him.
Amy was to wear a wire, hidden microphone, taped to her chest, and meet Cullen in a public place, sit across from a potential serial killer, and get him to confess, with knives and forks on the table and who knows what else going on. It was really terrifying, I think.
On the 12th of December 2003, Amy set off wearing a wire to meet up with Charles Cullen in person, while detectives listened in.
When we first walked into the bar, he hugged me, and I was actually very nervous that he was going to feel the wire that I was wearing. I was really pretty terrified. We talked for 2, maybe 3 hours before I finally had the courage to bring it up. And I said, here's all of these hospitals that have accused you of wrongdoing to patients, and I know you did it.
Amy was hoping for a confession and felt secure in the knowledge that the conversation was being listened to by police, who could swoop in and rescue her if things got out of control.
He changed. His voice, his demeanor, his face changed. He became a different person. That's the only way that I can describe it. He wasn't my friend Charlie anymore. He had become someone else, and I believe the murderer was sitting in front of me. He told me he wanted to go down fighting.
Amy continued talking to Charles Cullen, but he was refusing to confess to the murders. Amy even offered to go to the police station with him.
He did not want to go in to see the police. He didn't want his daughters believing that he was that person.
Even in the absence of a confession, detectives made the decision to apprehend Cullen before he could start his new job.
He left the restaurant and they arrested him that night. And I thought it was over. And I thought I would never have to speak to him again.
But Amy's job was far from done. Investigators still needed Cullen to confess to murder on the record. For a second time, Amy would go face-to-face with her friend and former colleague. It was a confrontation with one ultimate goal: get a confession, or Cullen could get away with murder. In December 2003, Charles Cullen was finally in custody. The 43-year-old nurse was linked to a series of murders at various hospitals across New Jersey and Pennsylvania.
Charles Cullen was arrested and brought to the Somerset jail, where he was held and questioned, and they hoped where he might finally confess. The stakes were extremely high here because in a circumstantial case, if Cullen denied everything, the idea of proving intent wasn't really on the table. You couldn't say that someone had made a medical mistake intentionally without direct evidence of that.
Cullen's former colleague, Amy Loughran, thought her role in the investigation was done, but detectives still needed her help in catching Cullen. On the 14th of December 2003, wearing a wire once more, Amy visited her friend while Cullen was still being held in jail.
I talked to him about how he could be the hero, and there was a concern that I would be pulled into a trial and that his daughters would be raked through the mud as well in a trial.
The threat of friends and family having to face such an ordeal seemed to be the trigger needed for Cullen to start admitting to what he'd done.
He confessed that he had injected one particular patient with digoxin to kill him. He was an elderly gentleman, but he was on his way out of the ICU. He was getting much better. And over again, his digoxin levels were going up, and no one could understand it.
That patient was Reverend Florian Gall, whose health had been improving before Cullen ended his life early. The game was up. The 43-year-old nurse decided to formally confess to detectives.
My intent was to decrease suffering in people I saw throughout my career. I believed that my actions would not cause them pain and suffering.
It's the beginnings of the floodgates opening and revealing to the world that Charles Cullen, the man who was later to be called the good nurse, had actually been exactly the reverse, the evil nurse. Cullen steadily admitted killing after killing after killing in a career stretching 16 years in Pennsylvania and New Jersey.
How many patients have you helped to their death as a result of your actions?
Possibly 30 to 40 patients.
Okay, 30 to 40 patients in total?
Amy called me and she said, Charles is killing people. And I asked her to repeat it because I couldn't believe what she was saying. And I remember just crouching down on my kitchen floor and just sobbing. And I just kept saying, no, he didn't. And when she stopped answering me, it was her silence. Sorry. It was her silence. And it spoke much louder than her words. You know, you always want to look for the good in people. You just don't want to believe that someone could actually do something like this.
Has everything you said been the truth throughout this entire many hours that we've been speaking?
To the best of my knowledge, yes, I have given as clear a picture as I can. There's a lot of fuzzy areas.
On the 15th of December 2003, Charles Cullen was finally charged with murder. He would go on to admit to many more murders across New Jersey and Pennsylvania, including 91-year-old Helen Dean and his first victim, Judge John Yengo, back in 1988. Prosecutors from the different jurisdictions met to discuss the case. Judge John Morganelli was then the district attorney for Northampton County.
We were able to find out when he worked and then look at the deaths that occurred at Easton Hospital during the times that he was on shift, and then look at those folks and then whittle it down. Was he working? Would he have a contact with this person?
One death in particular stood out from Cullen's time at Easton Hospital in 1998. 78-year-old Otto Schramm.
We were able to establish that the digoxin, which was present in Otto Schramm in excessive amounts, probably was a contributing factor to his death.
The case was looked at and the decision was made to charge Cullen for Otto's murder. Prosecutors from all of the jurisdictions needed Cullen's cooperation to help identify other victims. A plea deal was suggested.
Cullen would cooperate with identifying his victims if he could, and was acknowledging that he was involved in many more deaths than we even knew about, with the understanding that all of the prosecutors would not pursue a death sentence.
In total, Cullen pleaded guilty to murdering 29 people over 16 years, 22 people in New Jersey and 7 in Pennsylvania. He also pled guilty to 6 attempted murder charges.
Your Honor, I don't wish to be represented. I don't intend to confess the charges. I plan to plead guilty.
On the 2nd of March 2006, 46-year-old Charles Cullen was sentenced to 11 consecutive life sentences in New Jersey.
He sat with his eyes down, just really to avoid the family members of his victims as they told him what a nasty piece of work he was.
He treated them horribly, would not look at them, would not acknowledge them. He was not remorseful at all. That was not my friend Charlie.
A week later, Cullen appeared in court in Pennsylvania to be sentenced for the murders there.
As the judge spoke, Cullen began to say the same phrase over and over again. He said, Your Honor, you must recuse yourself. Your Honor, you must recuse yourself.
And he repeats it and repeats it for almost 30 minutes until finally the judge directs that he be gagged and bound.
They wheeled him out like Hannibal Lecter, tied together as he's continued to scream out the way out, echoing off the marble halls. It was one of the most horrifying things I've ever witnessed. It was absolutely chilling. That was his last public appearance.
Cullen received a further 8 life sentences for the murders in Pennsylvania, bringing the total to 19. He was sent to Trenton Maximum Security Prison to serve out his sentences.
Cullen will not be eligible for parole until 2388.
He's separated from the other prisoners 24 hours a day, 23 hours in his cell, because other prisoners would love to kill him.
As details of Cullen's horrific crimes were revealed, the extent of the horror became apparent. He'd been using other nurses to unknowingly help him end patients' lives.
He was injecting regular bags of fluid that we would all just grab and hang, thinking we're hanging just regular normal saline, and little did we know it would be spiked with whatever he put in there.
That was one of the worst parts. It wasn't just him. He wasn't the person who was harming these people. He made us all accomplices. I know that I was one of those nurses that hung those bags. I know I was. We all were. There's no way he could have known where those bags were going. He didn't just inject these people. He had very sinister motives, and he was a cold-blooded killer.
Charles Cullen wanted people to believe these were mercy killings, that he was simply putting people out of their misery. But this was proven false.
He tried to explain his actions, that these were people that were terminal, and yet these were people that did not consent to having their lives terminated, and many of them were not terminal.
Despite Cullen's many confessions and convictions, it's impossible to know just how many people died at the hands of the callous killer, masquerading as a kindly nurse.
At St. Barnabas Medical Center, where Cullen started his career, he confessed to killing 4 or 5 people there a week. He was there for 5 years. Charlie Cullen's body count, if accurate, even 400 is probably a low estimate, would make him the most prolific serial killer in American history.
I had no idea the amount of people he murdered and how many families were involved in that. I can't even tell you how much it affected me. I just wish that I could tell all of the families how sorry I am that I didn't see it sooner. He was right in front of me. He was right in front of me.
Charles Cullen harmed and murdered patients in their most vulnerable moments, and even got his unsuspecting colleagues to administer deadly medicines to his victims. His selfish actions will have a lasting effect on hundreds of people, and Charles Cullen will forever be known as one of the world's most evil killers.